In the steaming, mosquito-infested jungles of the Pacific, where the air itself seemed to rot and every shadow could hide a Japanese soldier ready to die for his emperor, the United States Marine Corps created some of the most feared men of World War II. They had no official sniper school yet, no special badges, no dramatic skull patches like the Germans. They were simply a handful of country boys handed a standard M1 Garand rifle, an odd-looking telescope bolted awkwardly to the side, and one quiet order: make the enemy die before he ever sees you. This is the forgotten story of the Marine snipers who turned John Garand's famous semi-automatic rifle into a precision instrument of death with nothing more than an 8-pound Unertl target scope, a leather cheek pad, and raw talent honed in the deer woods back home. Before Pearl Harbor, the word sniper barely existed in the American military vocabulary. The U.S. Army had tested scoped Springfield 1903s in the 1920s, then shelved the idea as unnecessary. The Marine Corps was even further behind. Their standard rifleman was expected to be good out to 500 yards with iron sights, and that was considered sufficient. But when the first Marines landed on Guadalcanal in August 1942, they learned in blood that the Japanese fought differently. A single enemy soldier with a bolt-action Arisaka lying motionless in the green hell for hours could pin down an entire company. Japanese officers and machine gun crews seemed to have eyes in the back of their heads, directing fire from hidden positions that no amount of artillery or charging Marines could silence quickly. Something had to be done. The solution came from an unlikely place, the civilian target shooting world. John Unertl, a German-born optician in Philadelphia, had been building some of the finest target scopes in America since the 1930s. His 8-pound scopes, with externally adjustable mounts and crystal-clear optics, were the choice of champions at Camp Perry. They were long, almost 24 inches, delicate, and designed for prone shooting off sandbags at paper targets, not war. But they were available, and in 1942, the Marine Corps bought every Unertl scope they could find. Attaching one to an M1 Garand was not simple. The Garand's top-loading clip system meant the scope could not sit directly over the receiver like on a bolt-action rifle. Instead, gunsmiths at the Philadelphia Depot and later at advanced bases in the Pacific mounted the Unertl on a Griffin and Hoe side bracket that offset the scope to the left. The eyepiece sat inches away from the shooter's eye, forcing him to turn his head slightly and press his cheek hard against a laced-on leather pad. It was awkward, ugly, and it worked.
The first scoped M1s reached the Solomons in late 1942. They were issued not to a formal sniper platoon, but to men hand-picked by their company commanders. Most came from rural America: Texas Panhandle, the hills of Tennessee, the high plains of Montana. They had grown up with .22s and .30-30s, shooting rabbits on the run and deer at distances most city boys couldn't imagine. One of them was Private Dale E. Miller from Missouri, who could drill a nickel at 200 yards with open sights before the war. Another was Corporal William H. White from Oregon, who had hunted cougars since he was 12. Training was almost non-existent. A lucky few got a week or two at the old French colonial barracks on New Caledonia, coached by a Marine gunner who had read a translated German sniper manual. Most learned on the job. They were taught to read the wind by watching spiderwebs drift, to judge range by the size of a man's helmet through the scope, to remain motionless for so long that flies crawled across their eyeballs without causing a blink. The rifle itself was still the standard M1 Garand, but carefully selected. Armorers at the division level went through crates of rifles looking for ones with especially tight tolerances and perfect bores. Triggers were honed to a crisp 4 pounds. The Unertl scope was zeroed at 300 yards and left there. The Marines learned to hold over or under for anything else. Ammunition was another problem. The M1 fired the full-power 3006 M2 ball round, which was accurate enough but not match-grade. Snipers hand-loaded or begged match ammunition from Navy shooters when they could, but most of the war they used whatever came in the bandoliers. On Guadalcanal, the first confirmed kills came in October 1942. A Japanese officer had been directing mortar fire from a kunai grass ridge for 3 days, killing dozens of Marines. Every time a patrol went after him, he vanished into the jungle. Finally, a young private from the 5th Marines named Robert Leckie, yes, the same Leckie who later wrote Helmet for My Pillow, watched a sergeant with a strange-looking Garand crawl out at dawn. The sergeant lay under a bush for 6 hours. When the officer finally stood to relieve himself, the sergeant fired once. The mortar fire stopped forever. By the time the campaign moved to New Britain and Cape Gloucester in December 1943, the scoped Garand was a recognized weapon. At Peleliu, in September 1944, the 1st Marine Division landed with perhaps 40 such rifles. The island was a coral rock covered in scrub, with almost no cover. Japanese defenders had spent months registering every square yard for defensive fire. The Marines advanced in the open under a rain of artillery and machine gun fire that made Tarawa look gentle. Here the snipers saved thousands of lives. One team, led by Sergeant John Eddy from Oklahoma, set up in a shell crater near the airfield. For 4 straight days, they never moved more than a few yards. Eddy and his spotter, Corporal Francis Pappy Gibbs, took turns sleeping and watching. Through the Unertl, they could see the Japanese machine gunners 600 yards away changing barrels on their Nambus. Whenever a helmet rose above the coral lip, one shot cracked. The 30-06 bullet, traveling nearly 3,000 feet per second, arrived before the sound. By the end of the battle, Eddy was credited with 52 confirmed kills, though he always said the number was closer to 80. Many bodies were never recovered in the blasted landscape.
The Unertl-equipped Garand had advantages no one had anticipated. Because it was semi-automatic, a sniper who missed with the first shot could fire again instantly without working a bolt. In the close country of the Pacific, where ranges were often under 200 yards and targets appeared suddenly, this was priceless. A bolt-action sniper might get one shot before the jungle exploded in return fire. The Garand sniper could empty his 8-round clip if necessary. There are documented cases of Marine snipers killing 3 and 4 enemy soldiers in seconds when a Japanese patrol stumbled into their hide. The scope itself was both miracle and headache. The Unertl's optics were so clear that on Saipan, Marines claimed they could see individual sweat beads on a Japanese soldier's face at 400 yards. But the external adjustment turrets were fragile. A branch could knock the scope off zero. Rain fogged the lenses constantly. Many snipers wrapped the scope in strips of inner tube or taped a tin can over the objective lens when crawling through mud. Perhaps the most famous action came on Okinawa in the spring of 1945. By then, the Marines had finally received small numbers of the proper M1C Garand with a Griffin and Howe mount and a 2.5 power M81 scope, but most snipers still carried the old offset Unertl rigs. On the Shuri line, Japanese defenders occupied a maze of caves and tombs. The only way to clear them was to send men forward under fire to place explosives at the cave mouths. Every approach was covered by hidden machine guns and knee mortars. A 22-year-old corporal from Alabama named Beaumont Holland changed that. For 9 days in May, Holland occupied a tiny observation post on the forward slope of Sugarloaf Hill. He had no cover except a few sandbags and a poncho. Through rain and constant shelling, he lay prone with his Garand across a rice bag. His score sheet, later found in his pocket, listed 39 officers and machine gun crewmen killed. Japanese counter-snipers hunted him relentlessly. One enemy sharpshooter finally located his position and put a round through Holland's canteen, another through the stock of his rifle.
Holland never flinched. On the 10th day, he killed the Japanese sniper at 720 yards, the longest confirmed kill ever made with a scoped M1 Garand in the Pacific. Holland survived the war with a Bronze Star, and nightmares he never talked about. Like most of them, he went home, hung the rifle above the fireplace if he kept it at all, and refused to hunt deer again. "I've done enough killing," he told his wife. The numbers will never be known exactly. The Marine Corps did not keep official sniper records until Korea, but division reports from 1943 to 1945 mention hundreds of telescopic riflemen and thousands of enemy casualties attributed to them. On Iwo Jima alone, the 5th Marine Division credited its 30 or 40 scoped Garand snipers with over 1,200 kills, nearly 10% of the entire Japanese garrison. When the war ended, the Unertl Garands were gathered up and thrown into Cosmoline. Most were rebuilt as standard rifles. A few ended up in VFW halls or private collections. Today, an original Marine Unertl Sniper Garand is one of the rarest and most valuable World War II firearms in existence. Fewer than 2,000 were ever converted, and perhaps 100 survive in original configuration. They never had a dramatic name like the German Scharfschützen or the Russian Sniperi. The Marines just called them the boys with the long scopes. But in the green hell of Guadalcanal, in the coral dust of Palelo, on the bloody ridges of Okinawa, they walked quietly, saw everything, and made the Imperial Japanese Army pay a terrible price for every yard of ground. One shot, one kill. No remorse, no fame. Just a country boy with a hunting rifle turned instrument of war, doing what he had to do so his friends could go home. That is the story of the invisible killers of the Pacific, the Marine snipers who wrote their chapter of the war in whispers and 30 caliber holes through Japanese helmets, one deadly accurate shot at a time.